Hello, I'm Bruce Stout, and I'm the director of the Rainmakers Forum. And welcome to our Knowledge Center. And particularly, this is our playlist, Your Business Exit. And my co-host is Anthony Citrolo. Anthony, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Bruce. And yourself?
I'm doing well, thanks. So, Anthony, you're my co-host. We've been working together for a long time, but some of the viewers may not know you. Tell us a little bit about you and your services.
Sure. Thanks, Bruce. And yeah, we have been doing this a while, and it's been very successful. I'm Anthony Citrolo. Our company is the NYBB Group. I founded that 20 years ago. Business owners turn to us as advisors when a business sale is desired, and they're looking for perhaps the best exit solution. We have, fortunately, a long history of optimizing the return for those owners when we sell the company and during the process of helping them get to that sale. We are able to get those transactions done relatively quickly and trying to really maximize the value with a ready, willing, and capable buyer.
Anthony, we have a guest with us this morning. Would you like to introduce him?
Sure, I'd love to. So Mark Palka is an old friend and also an associate of mine. We've been in many organizations and worked together. Mark is a former president of the international group, IMA, and has his own advisory practice and does some work on the accounting side, and also is a very qualified CFO for people who need assistance in their business. And Mark has been in business here for a few years, right, Mark? And
just a few.
Is pretty well known and pretty successful in what he does.
Mark, tell us a little bit about you and your services.
Okay, well, the way I describe my firm is we're a boutique consulting firm because we offer a multitude of services, one of which is fractional CFO, but we also offer fractional COO and CEO because of my experience of running company. We also do turnaround management. We do preparation for sales, due diligence, either on the buyer side or the seller side. And then, of course, we do offer tax preparation services.
So as a fractional CFO, you service companies that will be engaged at some time to be sold. And so do clear, concise policies and procedures enhance in any way the business value? And if so, how?
Well, absolutely. And in my background, I'm one of the original subject matter experts in the Sarbanes-Oxley laws on internal control and financial reporting. So back then, when we were really putting all of these procedures and policies in effect, it was mostly for public companies. But when you take it into the private sector, a lot of business owners don't understand the value of a well-run machine when it comes to either operations or financial, because when a prospective buyer comes in and looks at you, they're going to look at things like your error rates, how accurate are your financials, how well are you performing to deliver to the customer. And when your procedures fall apart, everything gets affected. And, we try to prepare companies and get them to what we call zero tolerance on mistakes, because that's going to maximize the value of the company. And it's also going to create, and I'm sure Anthony knows this, once the company is taken over or purchased by somebody else, it's less work that they have to do to get the company to run the way they want it to run. So my experience has been twofold. One, doing that for companies that want to prepare for sale. But on the turnaround management side, a lot of times that turnaround results in a sale. So while we're turning around the company, we're also cleaning up policies, procedures, how they operate, so that it's more efficient, more profitable than they have been. Doesn't mean they're profitable, but there's a customer base to be bought. There's a lot of value in the company. So we try to tighten everything up in the turnaround process, because if we think it's going to result in a sale, it's going to maximize value and also make it easier for the buyer to integrate that company into their operation.
Mark, do me a favor. Would you just, for the benefit of viewers, just explain a little bit about Sarbanes-Oxley? I'm not sure everybody understands what that is.
Well, in 2002, Congress passed a law called the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002. And basically what that did is it mandated public companies to have a system of internal controls to guarantee the accuracy of financial statement. And when it first came about, it was an 800-pound gorilla, because not only did we find out that companies were very lax on policies and procedures, but they were also lax on the IT side, which could make things more efficient and have less manual controls, more automated controls. So when you went in 2002 to get people compliant for 2004, you were really dealing in a lot of manual operations because the IT had been pretty much neglected for purposes of profit. Later on, during the processes, later on in 2009, 10, 11, 12, companies automated these controls so that they didn't have to pay consultants like us an extraordinary amount of money to go in and fix things and monitor things. So because once you put the controls in place, they had to be monitored and audited prior to the accounting firm that's going to sign your financials coming in and audit your controls. And the worst thing you can do in your financial statements is has what they used to call a material weakness.
Remember those days. Anthony, how does your firm work with Mark's firm?
So I think how we work, it's interesting that when Mark talked about policies and procedures, keep in mind that the average person who's the average acquirer, what they want to do is they want to hit the ground, not just running, but they want to probably take you out of the owner's seat and put themselves in the owner's seat, if you want to make it real simple. And if there's not a clear policies and procedures and a way to do business, that disrupts that whole, okay? And the other thing that happens is sometimes it's a decision factor that's that the business won't be acquired because it's just too difficult to make it work. So Mark and I, Mark's the guy you would call in to say, hey, listen, prior to sale, okay, let's look at the defects. Well, let's look at the things that need to be enhanced. Let's talk to somebody, and if there's a willing owner, Mark knows sometimes there's not always willing owners, right? Who say, yes, I want to maximize the value, the policy procedures, and other things that Mark brings to the table. I mean, he has the ability to help analyze the financial statements and work with them that way. And when you talked about IT has become such a big area now. I mean, there's internal controls related to IT, so you need to really kind of get your ship in order and running on the right path. Otherwise, you're really not going to sometimes not be able to sell the company and certainly not be able to maximize the value. So you need, somebody like Mark who can kind of get in there and kind of get dirty to a certain extent, right, Mark? And kind of really tell people what they need to hear and also help the employee and put the right procedures in place.
Mark, there are also some liability issues associated with IT.
Oh, of course. When, if you have an IT system that people can get into and hack and deal with your money, but also your customers and maybe even your supply chain, it could be a real issue. And then, of course, if it's your customers' information that's getting hacked and taken, there's always exposure there for identity theft and other ways of getting money out of other people. So I'll leave it as simple as that. Mm-hmm. And to Anthony's point, when I was a sitting CFO of a publicly traded company, we were not allowed to acquire certain product lines because of the manufacturer's restrictions. Mm-hmm. What we would do is go out and buy a company that had that product line, and that's how we acquired it. And my biggest difficulty, because as a public company, subject to policies and procedures, was getting that business owner, who was not public, to learn how to operate with these policies and procedures. And sometimes it was very painful.
I imagine sometimes it was nearly impossible to do that.
Well, it was never impossible because we really needed the person for the sales end and for the operational end of that particular product line. But eventually they came around and understood that there was no choice. This is the way it's going to be.
I'm going to raise this question to both of you, and I'm going to start with Mark. How important is a good management team as that relates to business value and maybe even ultimately a successful transaction?
Well, in the Sarbanes-Oxley law, they had a phrase called tone at the top. So if things were lax and loose throughout the organization, it's usually because the top management was loose and didn't follow tight procedures. So when you walk into a company for the first time, one of your first assessments is the tone at the top. If you're going to put in these new controls, procedures, is management going to support you? Or are they going to just say, we have to do this because we're selling the company? But if management is behind you, the tone at the top will transcend all the way down the chain so that the lowest person on the totem pole in that company gets it, that you're either going to do it right or you're not going to do it here.
So, Anthony, when there is a transaction, a sale or a merger, some management is going to be impacted by that. They may leave.
Sure. And
So that happens. How do you forecast that, and what do you do about that?
yeah. So, and Bruce, just going back a little bit, Bruce, your original question too was about how the management team, how critical it is. And when we are starting with any transaction, there are two real main questions that people ask. Oh, there's a lot of questions, but first thing is, of course, concerns financial statements, like how profitable the company is. Are they doing their statements according to GAAP? Are they, what are the trends? What are the forecasts? The second main question, probably as important as the first one today, is what does the management team look like? Because if that management team is not a sufficient management team or not one that has been operating the business successfully for a while, probably the likelihood of getting acquired is probably reduced significantly. And also the existing owner needs to realize that management team is really critical in the entire transaction. So my recommendation to folks is look at your management team, see who is critical. You may want to give them some kind of stay bonus. You might want to have them under contract. You may want to share with some of the critical management team what your plans are, because they could be rewarded very handsomely with the existing ownership and also with the new ownership. And also without that management team, you may really be kind of like really kind of put in a position where you're not going to be able to kind of achieve the goals that you want to.
Mark, you mentioned something I want to go back and revisit. You talked about turnaround management and companies that are lost companies. And you're saying that you work with them to get them either profitable or less in the negative. When those companies are acquired, are they acquired primarily for the operations, or what role do acquiring their NOLs, their net operating losses, play in that transaction?
I had one situation. I was in New Jersey, Princeton, New Jersey for 3 years, a company that was the top of the line in their industry. Their industry changed drastically, and now they were at the bottom of the heap. I like to call it companies with one foot in the grave and one on a banana peel, and the bankruptcy attorney sitting in the lobby. So I go in, and it's a great situation because you can do anything you want, because whatever they've been doing is not working. So you can change everything, get them all squared away. But in that particular case, it took 3 years, and it was a publicly traded company. So we were able to raise some money in some private offerings and selling off some patents in order to keep funding the company until we could get to the 2 sales that we ultimately consummated. Except for management, every single person in the company kept their job. And the reason for the acquisition was twofold. One was the operations, because embedded in that industry was a reclamation way of taking old product back into the factory, refurbishing it, and sending it out again. So that's a very valuable operation. And the other thing was they wanted the customer base, because people believed in the value of what that company delivered as far as product and service. So that's what they were buying. They were buying, for example, one of their biggest accounts was Morgan Stanley. The company that bought them couldn't get into Morgan Stanley. Now they're there. So it's those kind of synergies that come up. It took us 3 years to do it. We sold it off in 2 pieces, and we got it done. And I said, other than management, everybody kept their job, which was really our goal from day one.
Anthony, you must have a story like that as well.
Well, I'll tell you, we have stories of folks who, it's interesting when we talk to folks about transactions that are successful and ones that failed. You think about some of the ones that failed, and it's not for lack of anything, but typically leadership at the top of the company who was being acquired, and also the need to consider some of the defects in the business that need to be looked at. So we had an engineering company that was a pretty serious company that we had on the market, and the transaction was ready to go through. And what happened was when the acquirer realized that almost 90% of the relationships were held specifically with the owner, a transaction, the actual transaction ended up, being put aside until that maybe some of that can be repaired. So it's not a turnaround situation, but it's one where there are certainly issues that could have been addressed prior to any kind of transaction. And quite frankly, sometimes the owners are not always transparent with us.
What a shock.
Surprising. Surprising. We find out sometimes even diligence on things that really, you can't find out until you really dig real deep.
Right.
That's why I think, it's important to get somebody like Mark involved early on, because he could dig deep and kind of give you a lay of the land and help really repair some of the things that need to be taken care of. And maybe some can't, right, Mark? I mean, sometimes there's reasons that you can't really, bring any kind of real solution to people. And they have to know that, I think.
Well, the situation that I mentioned that took 3 years in New Jersey, it wasn't the management of the company. It was the board of directors who made a very bad decision that really wiped the company out financially. They decided they were going to acquire a company overseas. Management wasn't necessarily for it, but the board decided that's what we're going to do, and they lost their shirt. And now the gentleman who I worked with as the president of the company was a former IBM. He was a former board member of the company that voted against that acquisition. And he was just a true professional, real IBM, and really knew how to orchestrate, run, and coordinate his management team to run the company. But unfortunately, it was the industry. You were trying to surf against the waves instead of with the waves.
Well, guys, we're running out of time now. We're starting to wind down. So, Mark, final thoughts.
Final thoughts is, if you're thinking of selling your business, start 3 years before that you want to sell. Because in a lot of cases, based on auditing, financial due diligence, legal due diligence, depending on what the situation is, it easily, and Anthony can probably swear to this, can take that long.
And Mark, how can people reach you?
They can reach me through my phone number, first of all, 631-425-6374, and my email address, which is mpalker@cs.com.
Thank you. Anthony, final thoughts.
So the final thoughts are, there are risk factors when you go to sell every company, and you really should assess those risk factors. And Mark's suggestion of doing that not at the closing, or doing it 3 years or even longer before that. Look, we try to tell folks if they're going to exit their business, try to think about that when they start it. Of course, that doesn't reach too many people's brain real quickly. But I think you look at the risk factors, you look at people who can help you with that, and you look for assistance. You look for professionals like someone like Mark, and realize that you're working on probably what is the biggest asset sale of your life, which is your company. Bigger than probably your home, bigger than anything else. So you really should attend to it that way.
And how can people reach you?
Sure. Anthony at thenybbgroup.com. You can go to our website, thenybbgroup.com, and reach me there. And if anybody needs to reach Mark, I can help put them in touch with him also.
Gentlemen, thank you. This has been a really interesting conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. Appreciate it.
This is Bruce Stout for Exit Your Business. Thank you for joining us.